Hi, I'm Mari Frank, and I've been an attorney mediator for 31 years, and I've taught negotiation, mediation, conflict management, and I am so thrilled today because I am here with Mark Robert Waldman, who is a world-renowned neuropsychologist, and he is a scientist. He's an author of 15 books, and he is amazing. He is a guru to me. And so we're going to be talking about the brain and conflict resolution and conflict transformation. So I want to tell you about two books that I found extremely helpful that Mark wrote. And the first one he wrote is Words Can Change Your Brain. And he has a lot of great information about speaking and the tone of voice and how you speak and conflict management. And that one really is something that I use in my mediation all the time. And the other book that I think is fantastic is his newer book. It's called Neurowisdom, The Brain Science of Money, Happiness, and Success. And so that's another one that has a lot of juicy information about conflict transformation. And boy, do we need it in this world. So thank you for joining me, Mark. It's wonderful to have you.
It's a pleasure. I will accept the fact of you calling me a guru, although I would prefer the word charlatan. It turns out that when you're doing headlines, charlatan doesn't fit in, so I'm stuck with using the word guru. But I'm not a neuropsychologist. I'm simply a neuroscience researcher, and Andy Newberg and I, we're the guys who do all the brain scan studies of nuns, Buddhists, Pentecostals, atheists praying to God, the whole realm of spiritual experiences, looking at different forms of communication processes and how they work in the brain, and anything else that's of interest to us, the whole nature of human consciousness.
Yes, but I know you're a psychologist too. I know you've dealt with
No, I'm not.
Oh, you're not. Well, I thought you were because you are so brilliant with all this. But anyway.
I've been a therapist for many years. I've gone through psychoanalytic training, and I'm a neurocoach.
A neurocoach. All right. Well, thank you for all your neurocoaching of me, and in the Neuro Gym, you're wonderful. We all love you and really trust you, which I love that you answered me about trusting. Anyway, let's get started and talk about what happens when we're in conflict. What happens to our brain when we're in conflict?
Well, the first thing is to figure out what in the world do we mean by conflict. And so I don't know what the first thing is that comes to your mind, but for me, I think of two basic things. One is I'm in conflict with somebody else, a relationship conflict. Right. I tell my wife, let's go out to this restaurant. She says, I don't want to eat that kind of food. What would you want to do? We go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth until we finally say, I'd rather eat at home. A mild relationship conflict. More severe relationship conflict would be where one person begins to call another person's a name, considers themselves inferior, superior. Another interesting form of conflict, and we as parents know this, is that we automatically impose advice on our kids who rarely want it. And so they then resist our particular advice. But there's another form of conflict as well. And it has to do with a normal neurological process. In our right prefrontal cortex area, right above our right eye, there's this constant negative chatter going on all the time. You're no good. Oh, that isn't going to work. Oh, the world is a terrible place to live in, blah, 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 blah. In the left prefrontal cortex, there's an optimist. So we have a pessimist and an optimist. And these two positive and negative voices are chattering on and on and on all the time.
Right.
Conflict comes when you try to embrace both sides. Oh, I want to go do this activity. I have this particular goal. I want to double my income this particular year. I want to find the perfect mate. I want to have the perfect retirement community. And that negative voice goes on saying, no, you don't have enough money. You can't do it. I don't know if I'll find a partner to satisfy me. If you listen to both of those voices at the same time, that creates what we call neural dissonance. We don't realize that there's always this positive and negative chatter going on. If we just focus in on the negative chatter, we'll become more pessimistic. It'll create more anxiety because other parts of our brain assume that our negative thoughts are actual threats happening in the outside world. It's the unique thing about human brains. It just chatters on and on in these fantasy imagination centers in our frontal lobes, but information gets sent back to the other parts of our brain, and it reacts to those thoughts the same way it reacts to sight or smell or sounds. And so it doesn't know the difference between a fantasy thought and a reality thought, saying, hey, this may be dangerous, be a little cautious, go a little bit more slow. So we have those two types of conflict, but most people don't know that there's one part of your brain that you can actually exercise that allows you to look at this positive and negative chatter inside of your head, and you can learn how to watch those positive and negative voices. When you do so, you create what Daniel Goleman likes to call emotional intelligence. And that part of your brain is your social brain, and it creates a balance between your thoughts and your feelings and your reactions and your intuition, which brings us to what relationship conflict is. It's very interesting that this mechanism takes place in our social brain.
Yes.
So what happens is that I think one way, I believe one way, and I bump into somebody else and they open up their big mouth and they believe a different way.
Yes.
And here's another thing about the human brain. It absolutely hates to bump into any idea outside of itself or any thought or belief that disagrees, because that brain has spent maybe years, maybe even decades building a belief system. And then somebody comes along and says, no, that's not reality at all. It's almost like all this weight loss kind of issues that we've had before. Okay, eat a low-fat, high-carb diet. Now it turns out that the high carbs are probably killing you, and you can eat all the fat in the world, and it actually
that's good for your brain, right?
Good for your brain. But then there's all this rebellion. No, what you scientists, are you crazy? You just spent 30 years trying to convince us that I'm killing my heart and causing all these strokes by having a low-fat. And now you're saying fat is okay, and it's the carbs and the sugars that's killing me? I don't know whether to believe you or not. So that's the interesting thing about science, is that we're always looking at discovering new aspects, particularly when it comes to the brain. But the relationship conflict is very, very simple. Once I have my belief system, once I have all my thoughts organized in a certain way, the positive ones and the negative ones, and we bump into somebody who thinks about everything differently, just ask two people, give me your definition of love or God, and you just cannot find any similarities, only about 5 or 10% similarity in the whole world around those two key words. That's conflict. Oh, I think it's this. Oh, you think it's that. Oh, I thought you loved me, but I do love you. No, that's not what I call love. And that's where relationship conflicts begin, because I'm going to hold my position. Again, there's a way that you can shift back into the social brain and watch all of your own positive and negative chatter. And if you do that, you begin to realize you're not your thoughts. And that allows you to listen to the other person with greater clarity. So that's the first step in relationship conflict.
Yes. And that's when I walk into a mediation, and you could cut the room with a knife, right? So I do a lot of the things that you suggest to do, which is basically to have a positive attitude coming in and telling them and helping them to see where they do agree. Can we all agree where we're going to sit? If we even start with that, or can we all agree how long we're going to be here? Or can we agree to simple things? And then I go, look, see, there's so many ways that you already agree, to try and get them positive and have some, good optimism. Like, I know we're going to settle this today. I know that both of you have very good reasons for what you're thinking right now, and we're going to be able to hear each other. But it's tough when you start out, when you come out like this, when you're very angry as well. So
I have a great question for you around that one, because you have to go in with a very positive attitude. So I'd love to know how you deal with the following scenario, and I'll share with you some of the neuroscience of how I incorporate that into my mediation and divorce practice. I'm going in with a very positive attitude, which is, I am right and you are wrong. I'm very positive. I know exactly what I want in this divorce, and you're an idiot. So whatever you think you want in this divorce, that's because you're an idiot. I'm right. That's positive, isn't it?
Well, that isn't what I meant by positive. I was talking about where we're going, looking at where do we want to go. Where you are now is not feeling good. It's, your conflict right now. It feels adversarial, but there is a way that we're going to come to a conclusion where everybody can live with it. That's the kind of positive I was talking about, is kind of setting forth that intention, which you talk about intention. And I visualize before I even go in there, them shaking hands at the end, them signing an agreement, whether it's a divorce or whether it's a business agreement. I kind of visualize that. And I think that's kind of contagious, isn't it? When they see that, it seems to work. Why does it work?
Contagious only works when there is the sense that you actually like and feel safe and okay in the presence of the other person. But, as you know, I always, if I'm going to develop a neuroscientific strategy to help people cooperate better together, I'm always going to imagine the worst possible scenario, which is that these two people basically hate each other.
Right.
What I do is that I tell them, we're going to go in with that. I'm not going to convince you to go in and show all this warmth and love and kindness, towards the other person. I'm going to say, we know that you hate each other. We know you don't trust each other.
Right.
Let me show both of you a strategy that will cause your brain to trust each other, even though you know the other person is not trustworthy. And so that's where I have everybody close their eyes. I have them do a series of relaxation yawns. I'll usually ring this particular bell. I'll usually rehearse this with both of the individuals before we go into the mediation room or the divorce room or the reconciliation room.
Yes.
I'm going to teach them how to deeply relax using a yawn, some super slow stretching. I'm going to guide them into that because a lot of people in this upcoming conflict, they'll give you lip service, shall we say. They'll say, yeah, put a smile on your face. And they'll put the smile on your face, but they'll look more like a snarl, really.
Or they're sitting there like this, right?
Right. They'll sit there, they'll cross their arms and say, yes, I'm open and relaxed.
Right.
So I'll refer somebody to how to get rid of mental stress. Because again, when we're talking about conflict, the notion is I want to have this result in this conversation. This is anything. This is even just at home between you and your kids. But the other person has a different intention. Almost always two people have a different notion of what's fair, what's proper, what should or shouldn't happen. So I'm going to have them do a whole bunch of yawning because the yawning does something very interesting. It turns off the negative chatter in your brain. It turns it down a bunch. So now you're simply with less thoughts. So there you are. You're just present. It's like, take a picture of the person you hate the most, or even right now, just close your eyes and visualize somebody you can't stand. And the more you just visualize that face, you'll notice that first you'll start out with a disgusting feeling in your body. But the more you visualize that person not moving, the photograph, it becomes more and more neutral until you become bored looking at that particular picture. Again, it's just a simple strategy for turning off the emotional centers of the brain.
Right.
Then we have the person do super slow moving and stretching of their arms and torso and head and body, so they don't sit there with their arms crossed and put across a defensive posture. Because the way in which the human brain deals with relationships, first it's your facial expression. So all you have to do is have a slightly tense expression in your face, in your mouth. All you have to do is squint your eyes just a little bit. And these are normal instinctual facial reactions to both be aggressive and to protect yourself defensively. Or you have that terrified fear, oh no, I'm going to lose everything. Right. That shows up immediately in your face. And then it shows up secondarily in the tone of your voice. So the next thing I teach two people who are going to have a difficult conversation with each other, where there's a potential for conflict, I have them close their eyes. I have them do the yawning to turn off the negative chatter in their brain, the super slow stretching to get rid of all the defensive posturing. Then I ask them to visualize somebody or something that they deeply love. And if you all do this, who are listening to this program or watching this program, if you close your eyes and think about somebody or something you deeply love, it can even be a piece of chocolate if you want.
My golden retriever.
Yes. You'll feel a small half smile come across your face. And you'll feel a softening of the muscles around your eyes. And here's what's really cool. The moment the other person sees that soft Mona Lisa half smile, their brain will neurologically trust you, even if they know you are lying and faking it. I always like to use Bernie Madoff as an example.
Oh,
He
goodness.
always had that sweet, curmudgeony, cherub-like smile on his face, even when they were just hauling him off to prison. And you think, oh, God, what a nice guy. Sociopaths can master that smile, but we can do it as well. So if you're going to go into a difficult conversation, why not diffuse the potential of having conflict by first making sure you are mentally relaxed, physically relaxed, then just take 15 seconds and think about somebody or something you deeply love, have that Mona Lisa smile on your voice. And then when you go into the meeting room, open up with a compliment, that smile, whatever else. And if you slow your words down and speak a little warmer, a little softer, not only will the person trust you more, but if you do this in like a sham acupuncture study, that warm, soft voice actually stimulates the healing powers of the other person's body and brain. So imagine that. You use this technique, you'll actually be healing your adversary. You'll actually be healing your kid, your lover, your partner, even if it's a difficult conversation.
Yeah, I always remember low and slow, and that seems to really work. And the more that anyone raises their voice, well, you know what I do because of you is I have my bell, which you can see over there, the same bell that you ring. Yes. And I have that in the middle of the room when I first start a mediation, and I'll start out with that just to get everybody to relax a little. And then I tell them that if anybody raises their voice, I'm going to ring that bell. And when I do, everybody has to just stop talking until the bell stops ringing, and then they can start again without the blame, without the accusation, and just say how they're feeling from their own perspective. And that seems to work really well too, so that, you know, sometimes I'll start out with a couple in the first session, I'm ringing the bell. And the second session, maybe only once. So they're like Pavlov's dogs. They're trained to learn to speak instead of you messages, the I message. Like instead of saying, you did this, just like when this happened, I felt terrible.
Right.
And, you know, then people can kind of listen to each other a little bit more. Yeah.
And the bell is both a distract, you know, you can use the bell to distract a person. So you've taught them, you've said, these are the strategies I want you to use to maintain a sense of warmth, self-love, a little bit of compassion towards the other individual, or a lot of compassion if you really love this person and you know you're just dealing with a difficult, you know, painful issue, you know, in your life, maybe a health problem that's just scaring the living daylights out of you. If you and your partner can choose to consciously go into this deeply relaxed, positive state, you're already healing yourself of part of the problem that's taking place. And then I, too, use the bell as a reminder, and I can ask a person to immerse themselves fully in the sound of the bell so it fills their whole awareness and consciousness. So this is another brain-based strategy. It turns out that we can only be conscious of like maybe 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 words at a time.
Right.
So I want a person to focus in just on those 5 or 6 or 7 positive words or a positive thought, because that too turns off the negative chatter that will get most of us into trouble.
You know, what else, and I know you have this in your book too, Words Change Your Brain, but another thing that we as mediators do that I know you do as well is that reframing. You know, when someone speaks to us and tells us their story and we tell it back to them with a little bit of reframing. So if they say he was such a liar, you say, I heard you say that you felt that what he said was not truthful. Am I correct? You know, so that we are legitimizing what they're saying. They know that we're hearing them, we're listening. That power of effective and, you know, really powerful listening, and then reframing it so that the other person hears it reframed, like, oh, you didn't think I was telling the truth.
So the way in which I handle that is, and I'll use it anytime I'm giving a presentation to a large group or even to 2 people who are about to, you know, engage in a difficult conversation. I will show them the effects of what a single word is. If you flash the word no while
Right.
you're sitting in an fMRI brain scanner, more
Yeah.
stress neurochemicals get released from all of the fear and threat circuits throughout your whole brain. If a half a second of seeing the word no already puts you into a defensive mode, imagine what's happening to the other person when they say, I don't like this, and that's not fair, and I don't want to do that. Even if it's not fair, even if that's all that stuff is true,
Right.
every time your brain hears a negative word, it shuts down. It shuts down the ability for you to even come up with strategic solutions to get around that particular problem. So we
Right.
overemphasize that problem by simply saying, I don't care if you even lie to the individual, say something positive and don't use any negative expression. And if it pops up, I'm going to use my bell and say, whoop, let's stop, back up, reframe that. So I'm constantly teaching people even when I go into a corporate environment, many times there's a conflict between maybe the CEO and the COO, or between a manager and a team leader. And I have to say, no, you can't be just telling the other person what to do and saying, no, 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 you cannot do that. No, you can't do that. Even then, I put the manager in the defensive thing. I'm going to say, let's just do an experiment. And we role play yes, 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 yes with no, 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 no. And we very quickly teach managers that no matter what the problem is, there's a way of starting out with a compliment. So you just think about one small, tiny thing you really like about that person and begin there. And then say, let's explore an issue that I think perhaps maybe we can do better at.
You know, I'm in the legal system, and the legal system is set up to be adversarial, So the petitioner or the plaintiff will make accusations against the defendant or the respondent.
That's
And then
terrible.
it's a terrible
I've been
system,
there.
right? And this is such a terrible system. And so when I meet with people who are already in the system with their attorneys, you can imagine what it's like. They don't want to hear this. They don't want to hear it. So then for me to say a compliment, it's kind of hard for me to even do that. So I have
No, we're basically talking about two people who want to find a peaceful way to handle a relationship problem.
Well, but let me tell you, when they come to mediation, they've either used up a bunch of money and they don't want to litigate, or they really do want to settle. They're tired of it. Maybe the respondent or whatever, they're just sick of the whole system. So they do want to settle, but they're in this old mindset of you're wrong. So it's like having to bring them out of it. And, I do use everything that you talk about, but I can't always tell them. Sometimes I'll talk about the research that you have explained about the yawning and the stretching and how that changes the brain. That really helps. But otherwise, they look at me like I'm a weirdo, because they have to get out of that thing that gets to their limbic system, right? Let's talk a little bit about that. Let's talk about the contagiousness of anger and hostility. How do we deal with that, and what's happening in our brains?
Well, that's the whole thing. The brain seems to want to register negativity about 3 or 4 times more strongly than any positive thing that we say. And this is where Barbara Fredrickson and Seligman and other leaders in the positive psychology world, began to recognize and do research that for every negative thought we have, if we don't come up with 5, 6, 7 positive thoughts to all of those negative things that we happen, we end up spending the rest of our lives caught up in chronic anxiety and depression. I have a question, though, about the earlier thing that you were saying. I don't know if you ever used this strategy when two people want to express all of their anger and rage at each other. For some reason or another, when you do neuroscientific research on anger, it seems to be that a little drop of anger generates a ton more of anger in your own brain. So the more
and everybody else's, it's contagious, right?
So the moment I say, I can't stand you, something gets released, and now you want to give 5 more insults to that individual. So again, we use a particular rule. I call it the 10-10 game. And in legal situations, we call it the 1-sentence rule. And we get an agreement between the attorney and the two conflicting individuals. We're going to go round circle, but you each have one sentence to say, no more than 20 words or about 10 seconds or whatever else. And so you can speak your one sentence, your partner speaks one sentence, the attorney speaks one sentence to push the conversation in a certain direction. And what we found is that we can push both people into an agreement. They may be grumpy and irritable and still in about 10 or 20 minutes that normally would take 3 or 4 hours of normal litigation or attorney banter. Do you have a similar strategy?
No, but I do try and tell them to say it as succinctly as possible, because I do know your research about trying to keep things within 10 words or 20 words. So
if you told them to raise their hands and with each word they speak, raise one finger, and when you run out of fingers, stop.
We're done, right? Well, believe it or not, we are done. I mean, we're done with this wonderful radio interview, and we're going to have to do more because there's just so much brilliance and so much wisdom that you can share with us about conflict. So thank you so much for joining us.
This was really, really fun. Thank you.